guys, it's Trina, and today I want to talk about all of the series that I finished in 2017. This is a video that I like to do at the end of each year and just talk about all the book series I finished and whether or not I am glad that I finished them and stuck it out. These are all series that are completely finished at this point. Like, the last book is published, it's over. There is always the chance that an author could decide to write another book in the series in the future or like publish more novellas or something. But as of right now, these series are like done, they're over with, we've got the finale, and I've read all the books in those series. So I completed a total of 8 series last year, and the first one I'm going to be reviewing is the Young Elites Trilogy by Marie Lu. This is YA fantasy. The main character is kind of a villain, but we are following different groups of basically superheroes in their world. They all have these powers that are the result of like a genetic mutation that occurred. And one of my favorite ways that I heard somebody describe this series was like if it's X-Men set in Renaissance Italy. And the main character that we follow, she is very morally gray. She does have 2 different groups of people that she could join with, the good guys or the bad guys, and she struggles with that decision, and she does a lot of villainous things, and I definitely think that having that perspective is unique. It does make this kind of story seem a little bit more refreshing, but even though she's a villain, you can understand why she does the things that she does. So, you know, I really enjoyed that aspect. I liked that about it. As I read them, I gave each of them either 5 or 4.5 star ratings. However, looking back at the series, I do realize that it hasn't really stuck with me long term. I don't really remember all of the things that happened. So while I think that they were well written and enjoyable in the moment, these didn't linger with me. So in retrospect, I have reduced my ratings to all of the 3 books to 4 stars, which is a 4-star series average overall. Do I think that this series was worth finishing? For me, it was. I do think that Marie Lu excels at series conclusions. That's in my personal opinion, because she doesn't wrap things up in a nice neat little bow, but you can see why she ends things the way that she does, and it makes sense within that world and those characters. So I did think that this series ended on a strong note. The next series I finished in 2017 was the Wrath and the Dawn duology by Renee. It is a YA fantasy retelling of 1001 Nights. That classic story is about a king who marries a new woman every day and then kills her. And in this book, we're following a main character whose best friend was the king's last wife. So her best friend was killed, and our main character decides, I'm gonna marry the king and I'm gonna kill him before he can kill me to get revenge for her friend. This is a very popular series, but I have an unpopular opinion on it. I don't really enjoy this series. I just didn't think that it set itself apart enough from that tale, and the ways that it was different, like where it was developing our main character, Shazi, I just thought that those parts of the book relied so heavily on very, very, very overused tropes. There is like this case of like hate to love, but it happens so quickly it almost feels like insta-love once it does happen. There's a totally unnecessary love triangle. I just wasn't a big fan of kind of how cliche it felt. I felt like I had read this story before. I didn't think that it set itself apart. Additionally, I really didn't think that the world outside of this one setting was well developed at all, even though, especially in book 2, we're supposed to believe that there is a bigger world than just this one palace and like things are happening, but like I didn't get any kind of grasp on the scope of the world. The magic system was sorely lacking. So to me, this was just underdeveloped for a fantasy. I gave the first book 2 stars. However, I did think that the second book was a little bit stronger, but not by much, so I rated it 3 stars, so my series average is 2.5 stars. Am I glad that I finished this series? Not really. I personally don't think it was worth my time because this wasn't the type of fantasy that I enjoy, but I do think that the second book was stronger than the first book in some ways. It had kind of gotten away from that retelling aspect, so it was able to stand on its own a lot better. I just think that because I didn't like that first book as much and wasn't invested in the characters and the relationships, that's the only reason why I didn't like the second book. But if you were invested in the first book, I definitely think you would enjoy the second one. Next, I finished the Across the Universe Trilogy by Beth. Revis. This is a young adult science fiction series about people are having to leave Earth. They found a new planet that we think is inhabitable, but the journey to get there is going to be like hundreds of years. So the people who are traveling there go on this spaceship, they're frozen to like sleep the entire journey, but our main character wakes up like hundreds of years too soon. My overall series average is 2.7 stars, so I wasn't really enjoying them. And I think the reason that I didn't connect well with this series is because I went into it really expecting like sci-fi space stuff, and it was much more of just a dystopian. And I didn't get that. I didn't go into it prepared for that, so I was kind of like, it was just a hard adjustment for me. Additionally, I did not like the romance at all. I thought that it was very, very possessive and jealous. Am I glad that I finished out this series? I guess so, just because I had been so curious in this series for so long that I think that it would have just bothered me if I had left it unfinished. And I was always reading the books hoping that they would get better, like that the conclusion would make everything worth it in the end. But unfortunately, I think that not really having a connection with the main romance, which is pretty prevalent throughout the series, kind of just hindered my enjoyment of it overall. I would recommend this series for you, however, if you really love the Maze Runner series by James Dashner, because this book literally feels like Maze Runner just set in space. Next, I finished the March Trilogy, which is a series of graphic novels by John Lewis, Andrew Ayton, and Nate Powell. These are graphic memoirs of John Lewis's life. He is a U.S. political figure who is a very active leader in the civil rights movement, and so this is just his story in his own words. This series portrays just John Lewis's life growing up, what got him into protesting, into marching. It covers a lot of very important historical protest speeches, marches, and then there are a lot of other civil rights leaders that are shown in this, like Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And it also covers parts of Obama's presidential inauguration and like how these things tied into each other. I think the series was very, very impactful. I gave all three of these books 5 stars each, so it's a 5-star series in my opinion. I live in the US. These are things that we cover in like our history classes, but I really wish that we had had these books to like study in school, because like the format was just much more engaging than a textbook. I mean, I think anyone would benefit from these, but I definitely would recommend this to anyone that is currently like in school who is studying the civil rights movement. There is some like violence and brutality and stuff, but these are all black and white images that kind of avoids a bit of the gore. But, you know, I think definitely teenagers could handle the content in them. You'll be familiar with it, and I just think it will bring your history classes to life a little bit better. Next, I finished the Starbound Trilogy by Amie Kaufman and Meagan Spooner. This is another young adult science fiction series, and these are like companion novels where each of the 3 books follows a different pair of characters. Romance is a pretty prevalent theme in all of them. This is a story that is set across several different planets, and our characters just keep like uncovering different parts of this overall space corporation cover-up. And there are some aliens in this series. That's an aspect that I really loved. I loved just how they were portrayed and the type of beings that they were. My favorite book in this series was book 1, because that has such a strong survival element to it, and I love survival stories. My least favorite in the series was book 2, just because it was very much like bridging the gap. And then book 3 was a strong finale. I definitely think that it was worth finishing this series out. It took me forever to finally get to the 3rd book in this series. I just kept putting it off and putting it off, and I finally read it this year, and I'm really glad that I did. That 3rd book had a lot of action. We did meet 2 new characters in it, and I really loved them, but I really enjoyed seeing the characters from the first 2 books come together in this one as well. My overall series rating is a 4.3 stars, and I would recommend this if you like science fiction. The first book I think you would enjoy if you like survival stories, and I also think you would really enjoy this if you like the Illuminae series, which is also co-written by Amie Kaufman along with Jay Kristoff. I think that there are some similarities there in terms of, you know, each of the books follows different pairs of characters, and they're all like uncovering some sketchy business with a space corporation. There are some similarities there, but the series themselves are very different in terms of story and characters and like the format and stuff. Starbound's a little bit of a more quiet series, but I still think that it's an amazing series. I really enjoyed it. I think you would like it if you like YA science fiction with a heavy dose of romance. I've also finished the Passenger Duology by Alexandra Bracken last year. This is a young adult action and adventure series about time travel. The main character finds out that she is from a long family line of time travelers, and she kind of gets engrossed in this plot that finds her like running throughout time and trying to find a hidden object to try and save her mother. My average rating for the series would be 3 stars because I gave the first book 4 stars and I gave the second book 2 stars. I didn't like it as much. I had trouble getting into the first book. I wasn't really engaged with it until about halfway through, and then I was hooked from there on, and I really enjoyed the second half of the first book, and it left me really needing more. I was so excited to pick up book 2, and then when I picked up book 2, the pace had had just completely halted. Overall, to me, I just felt like this series was overly descriptive and not fast-paced enough for a series that is an action, adventure, time travel series. Like, big things are happening and yet the pace is so slow. Like, there are moments where it gets faster, but it would be like you're zooming along and then all of a sudden you slam on the brakes, and then you start zooming along again and then you slam on the brakes. It wasn't, you know, the pacing that I needed in terms of this amazing premise. I'm not really glad that I stuck it out to the end because the second book really let me down. I also just don't think the conclusion answered everything I needed from a lot of the characters that I had been invested in, and then we just like never really know what happened to them. No thank you. I kind of wish I hadn't finished this one out, but I mean, I wouldn't have known that beforehand, so I mean, whatever. If you did enjoy Alexandra Bracken's Darkest Minds series, you are familiar with her writing already. If you liked her writing in that series, you're probably going to like this one more than I did. I have personally found that I just don't get along well with her particular writing style. But if you already know that you like her writing and you love her descriptions and stuff, definitely check out the Passenger series. Don't let me talk you out of it. I also finished the To All the Boys I've Loved Before trilogy by Jenny Han. This is one of those series that I'm pretty sure it was on last year's finished series list because this was supposed to be just a duology and then another book was added, so hey, next year we may have a fourth book. But right now it's just a trilogy. This is a young adult contemporary romance series, and the first book starts out with a girl who has had a lot of crushes but never had a boyfriend, and she writes letters to her crushes that she just kind of keeps hides in her closet to, like, you know, be done with her feelings. But one day they all get sent out, and so she is dealing with the repercussions of all these guys finding out that she had crushes on them. Overall, it's a 4.3 average rating for me because I did pretty much enjoy it. The first book was my favorite, definitely, because it just had certain romantic tropes in it and more chemistry between the characters than I felt like the other two books did. Book 2 is my least favorite. I thought there was a little bit too much of miscommunication in it. Book 3 I did enjoy. I am glad that I finished out the series so far because it explores more of an established relationship, and I just thought that that was something that I enjoy reading about. I don't always want to read about books that are just about the build-up until these characters get together. I like books that also explore a relationship that has been going on for a while and the things that couples might be dealing with. And yeah, if you like YA Contemporary, definitely check it out. And finally, I finished the Conspiracy of Us trilogy by Maggie Hall last year. This is another YA action-adventure series. It's about a main character who finds out that her family's bloodline is part of like this ancient secret society. They're trying to find the tomb of Alexandra the Great because there's this like prophecy about the people that can find him are going to be in control of great world power. So she gets wrapped up in all of this. She's like the key to it, apparently. And I thought that this one was a really fun, fast-paced series. A lot of people compare it to like the Da Vinci Code meets National Treasure. I think those are very accurate comparisons because it's like you're following different clues, you're globetrotting. You do see very many different locations around the world in this series. I just thought that this one was a fun series. It's a little bit different than the stuff that I read. I really enjoyed, you know, traveling around the world and following these clues. I gave all these books 4 stars, so while I was enjoying them, they aren't like the best thing ever, but my series average would be 4 stars since all of them were rated 4 stars. I am glad that I finished out the series. I had just a good time with it. I was able to binge read all 3 of these books back to back over the summer, and yeah, the third book definitely wrapped things up in a way that I thought was pretty good. I really enjoyed it. I loved the series. I definitely think if you like, you know, National Treasure and stuff like that, you would enjoy this series. Those are the 8 series that I finished in 2017, and I do want to make a little note here. I also kind of finished the A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas, and what I mean by kind of is I've read all 3 of the main books in the series, and I was gonna put them on my list as well, but then she recently announced that she's gonna write a novella set in the same world following those same characters that's going to be like an epilogue, like a conclusion to that series. And I know that in the past, sometimes when she writes novellas, they turn into full-length books or very long novellas. So I'm gonna like wait and talk about that one after I read the novella, because I feel like if we're getting a conclusion to the series, am I really done with it? I don't know. But I did just want to kind of address that in case you guys have followed my reading over the year and you guys know that I read Aka War this year and are like, well, why isn't that series on the list? Well, that's kind of why, because I just want to wait and see what that novella has in store. I would love to know what series you guys finished this year, or if there are any series that you're really wanting to finish, get around to finally picking up the last book in like 2018, let me know that down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm also going to be putting up a series I quit video sometime soon, so stay tuned for that if you like those types of videos. But thank you for watching, and I will see you in the comments. Bye!